do you worry that could be a case, that Israel's attempt for a regime change could be successful, but that could lead to more disastrous consequences for Iran and neighboring countries? And what would that mean for the region? We've got 90 people living in poverty, similar to what we have in Yemen, or a country is completely, that has no rule of law, and that has nuclear facilities as well.
So you're nailing all the right points there, Mario. I'm not sure that Israel or the United States cares whether or not Iran falls into political disarray, falls into some sort of internal civil war, similar to Libya and Syria and Yemen. I'm not sure that they're thinking about that in terms of an economic impact or a long-term military impact. I think their short-term idea is, if it implodes and it falls apart, then we're all better for it. We're all a little bit safer. But the truth is that just because Iran isn't really inside Israel's sphere of influence and Iran isn't inside the United States' sphere of influence doesn't mean that Iran isn't inside the sphere of influence of close allies, right? We've got all of your Khaliji Arab states that have some sort of trade relationship with Iran, and then you have Iran's relationship with the developing world and the developing kind of
the BRICS members.
Right. So it's got economic ties and it's got international geopolitical relevance beyond what I think the average American or the average Israeli understands. So if it falls into civil war, and if all of its military goods and its uranium and nuclear infrastructure is up for grabs, that doesn't put the world in a safer place. That puts the world in a more dangerous place.
Yeah, and it goes back to the point: will Russia and China allow Iran to go into not a civil war, but it just would even allow for a regime change?
And if they do,
should not be ignored.
Would they force a Russian or Chinese motivated regime change instead of an Israeli regime change?
Exactly. And talking about Russia, how do you think that will impact Ukraine? Because Russia is obviously busy with Ukraine right now. They just lost one of their main suppliers. Could that weaken Russia much? How important was Iran for the Russian war against Ukraine?
I don't know that I don't think anybody outside of intelligence circles really knows how important Iran was to Russia's continued conflict in Ukraine. Much of Russia's success is domestic. Much of their weapons making and weapons manufacturing capability really is within Russia itself. It benefited from partnerships early on, especially with Iran and North Korea. But as it continues to kind of project its war, it's learned the economic benefits of being a wartime country and a wartime economy. So I'm not sure that that damaging Iran is going to significantly hamper Russia's position in Ukraine, especially considering the fact that Ukraine is also struggling with maintaining support from the West.
In wars like this, how active would back-channel communications be? I remember, I'll give you an example. When I asked President Lukashenko that question, because obviously he was someone that mediated the, do you remember that, everyone forgets about it, the mutiny against Putin that happened 2 years ago. Everyone forgot what Wagner and Prigozhin did back then, and that Lukashenko got them to reach some sort of agreement. So I asked him about it, and he told me about all the communication that happened behind the scenes, and then he managed to get an agreement between Putin, and he managed to convince Prigozhin not to continue marching towards the Kremlin by telling him, hey, if you continue marching towards the Kremlin, Belarus will get involved, and will get involved in the support of Putin. And he, in Lukashenko's words, he says this is the reason that Prigozhin stopped marching. And the reason I ask that question is I'm always curious, and I ask this to a lot of leaders, is how much back-channel communications happen? Do you think there's back-channel communications right now directly between Iran and Israel? And how, if so, how often do you think they communicate? Or is it all through third parties and it's very limited? I'm just very curious as when there's countries that have tens of millions of people that are being impacted by their decisions, do the leaders at least talk to each other no matter how much they hate each other?
Usually the answer is no. Usually those leaders do not talk to each other because there's political ramifications if they do, right? In order for Netanyahu to have a conversation with any of the leaders in Iran, it would essentially make it look like Netanyahu is not in as powerful a position as he wants people to believe. Because if he's willing to take a call from any senior administrator, any senior theologian, it doesn't matter. Anybody he takes a call with is now, through the eyes of the people, equal to them. So because of that political posturing, what happens in conflict is they push communication down the chain. So it's some mid-level bureaucrat in the Foreign Affairs Office who talks to another mid-level bureaucrat in a foreign affairs office for a third country who talks to another mid-level bureaucrat in Iran. And
Well,
only after these mid-level bureaucrats reach some sort of agreement does the call escalate up and escalate up higher and higher. I mean, a fantastic example of this is what you've seen between Ukraine and Russia, where Putin intentionally chooses not to attend meetings he says he will attend because he wants to show that he has the power to not show up, which makes Russia look strong. And then when Zelensky shows up to a negotiating table and Putin doesn't show up, it makes Ukraine look weak, right? That's the game that leaders try to play.
yeah, true. But so there is, so obviously there would be indirect communications between the two countries. So let's kind of pivot to the big elephant in the room, American involvement. First question, I asked you that earlier. Do you think how much do you think the US knew about this attack? Because you kind of hinted that Netanyahu made that decision by himself, which is not a good look for Trump and for the US. So do you think they were at least aware, because they were informed of the attack? The ambassador said that, and I think Israel said that publicly before that. Do you think they were informed of the attack? And how much details do you think they would have gotten from Israel?
I do believe that they were informed, and I do believe they were probably told some pretty specific details in the hours immediately before the attack. I don't believe that Israel would have advised the U.S. weeks in advance of the day, time, and strategy. I think they would have said, hey, we're going to launch an attack against the nuclear facilities. We're going to use Mossad. We're going to attack and try to assassinate, political and nuclear power brokers in Iran, within the borders of Iran. We are going to do this. And the United States probably had a chance to say, hey, we would like that you reconsider this. We would like that if you launch this attack, you launch it in July or August. Like, there's all of that kind of negotiation most likely happened. But at the end of the day, I do not believe Donald Trump knew in detail 48 hours before Israel launched their attack. I think Donald Trump probably would have found out the details 4 hours or 6 hours before Israel launched the attack. And part of that is because Israel's trying to compartmentalize the opportunity for a leak, because they don't know whether or not somebody in the United States could leak the information to Israel or leak the information to Iran. Keep in mind that about a year ago, that's exactly what happened. A year ago, Israel was sharing information with the United States, and then an NSA person at the United States leaked the information worldwide. So there's a precedent now for Israel to not share all of its details with the United States.
That's crazy. That's true. I remember I think they were just sentenced to 3 years in jail yesterday, the day before you saw that. But that's crazy. I completely forgot about that. That was the plan. Was that plans for an Israeli response to an Iranian attack that was leaked to some media organizations? I can't remember what it was. What does that say about U.S. intelligence? That's pretty surprising.
And I think this is what when you talk about the elephant in the room, Mario, you have to be talking about the decline of American reliability and American influence worldwide. And I think that's what Donald Trump is really struggling with right now, is he's trying to find a way to rebuild that counterbalance of influence that the United States used to have, because the United States has been riddled with spies from China and Russia in our CIA and our military and our army and our navy. We've been absolutely riddled with fundamentalists, with ISIS and other extremists being built right here at home, here in the United States. So, the security and the protection of the United States is in question. And now you're starting to see that there's sympathizers within our own intelligence infrastructure that are trying to involve themselves in the conflict in Israel and the conflict in Ukraine and the conflict in Taiwan. It's a bad look for a country that's supposed to look like it's the premier professional intelligence organization of the world.
Yeah, I agree. And also the fact that the US did not have the ability to authorize such an attack by Israel would say a lot about the US position in the world, the US hegemony as well. Now, it's more and more things that are starting to indicate that we do live in a multipolar world, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I don't know how that will materialize, because we really haven't lived through a multipolar world for such a long time. And there's advantages and disadvantages to hegemony. But I think you'd agree with that statement, that the US influence in the world and the Middle East, has it, actually, I'm going to challenge it, has it diminished? Because you've also got a major enemy of the US that's been significantly weakened, a strong ally to US and to China and Russia. So maybe there's another way of looking at this, is that this could be a US you're a success story. That, hey, we've managed to take out, without actually getting involved, we've managed to take out one of our main enemies. Is that a fair argument to make as well?
I would say that it's a fair argument that that diminishing Iran benefits the United States. That's a very fair argument. But the United States can't take credit for it. The United States wasn't involved. The United States doesn't have a clear line of accountability to the conflict, to the strategy, to the planning. It's all Israel. And if anything, the public, what's been shared publicly, is that the United States is trying to negotiate with Iran.